Steven Spielberg is the greatest filmmaker who ever lived. Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan. The man invented the modern blockbuster and then won Oscars for the most serious films of his generation. But his real secret was never the camera or the budget or the technology. It was the 6 actors he trusted most, the ones he kept calling back, the ones who left a permanent mark on him. Hear their stories. Harrison Ford. During the brutal Tunisia shoot of Raiders of the Lost Ark, the heat was unbearable and over 150 crew members were sick with dysentery. Ford was among the worst affected. A long, elaborate sword fight scene was on the schedule that would have taken several days to film. Ford, who could barely stand, walked up to Spielberg and suggested simply shooting the swordsman instead of fighting him. Spielberg had been thinking the exact same thing. They did it in minutes. That single decision became one of the most quoted and beloved moments in adventure cinema history. People still laugh at it more than 40 years later. That story tells you everything about why Spielberg kept coming back to Ford. It was not just talent. It was the rare and precious quality of 2 creative minds that operate on the same wavelength without needing long explanation. Spielberg trusted Ford so deeply that he wanted him for the lead in Jurassic Park as well. When Ford turned it down, Spielberg was not annoyed. He was genuinely heartbroken. That is how much Ford meant to him. When Harrison Ford is in your frame, audiences believe they are watching a real hero. That quality cannot be manufactured. Ford simply had it. Richard Dreyfuss. Before Ford, there was Dreyfuss, and their bond was forged in one of the most difficult productions in Hollywood history. Jaws in 1975 was a nightmare. The mechanical shark broke down constantly. A shoot planned for 55 days stretched to 159. Spielberg genuinely believed his career was finished. The industry was whispering that he would never work again. In the middle of all that chaos, Dreyfuss played the fast-talking marine biologist Hooper and held the entire film together with his energy and wit. The 2 men came out of that miserable experience as creative soulmates. When Spielberg made Close Encounters of the Third Kind next, he wanted Dreyfuss in the lead despite major Hollywood names competing for the role. Dreyfuss campaigned so persistently and so relentlessly that Spielberg admitted he simply talked him into it. But the deeper reason was more revealing. Spielberg has said that casting Dreyfuss as the obsessed ordinary man Roy Neary was really a way of casting a version of himself on screen. The wide-eyed everyman staring up at something incomprehensible with wonder and terror. Richard Dreyfuss was Spielberg's alter ego, the director putting his own inner life into the film through another person's face. Daniel Day-Lewis. When Spielberg needed someone to play Abraham Lincoln for his 2012 biographical film, he knew there was only one man for the role. The problem was that man had already said no. Day-Lewis turned Spielberg down for years, finding the idea of playing Lincoln almost absurd. Liam Neeson held the role for a long time, but eventually stepped away gracefully and personally called Spielberg to tell him Day-Lewis was the only right choice. Spielberg went back with a sharper, more focused script, and this time Day-Lewis agreed. But he needed a full year to prepare. What followed became legendary. He read over 100 books about Lincoln. He built the president's voice from historical records, choosing a higher, softer tone, completely different for what audiences expected. He sent Spielberg a recording of that voice marked with a skull and crossbones as a private warning. Spielberg said when he played it, he did not hear an actor. He felt Lincoln speaking directly to him. On set, nobody called Day-Lewis by his real name. Everyone, including Spielberg, addressed him exclusively as Mr. President. During one powerful speech scene, Spielberg became so overwhelmed watching the performance that he had to physically leave the set. Day-Lewis, still completely in character as Lincoln followed him, found him in another room and quietly put his arms around him, offering comfort without ever once stepping outside the role. The actor holding the director together. Day-Lewis won his 3rd Oscar for that performance. No other screen actor has won 3. And Spielberg walked away permanently changed by the experience. Tom Hanks. Hanks was actually reluctant to work with Spielberg at first because he had seen close friendships destroyed by the pressures of making films together, and he did not want to risk that. He committed anyway, and what happened during the making of Saving Private Ryan says everything about why this partnership became the defining collaboration of Spielberg's later career. Before filming began, Spielberg put the main cast through a genuinely brutal week-long military boot camp in the English countryside, run by a tough former Marine. Freezing rain, almost no sleep, constant physical misery. 3 days and the entire cast voted to quit and walk out. Every single actor voted to leave, except Tom Hanks. He was the only one who voted to stay, and he quietly and calmly convinced every one of his castmates to stay with him. He told them the suffering would make the film real, and that the film deserved that reality. Vin Diesel, who was there later, said he could not believe the biggest star in the company was voting to keep suffering when he had no obligation to be there at all. That moment bonded the cast permanently. Spielberg compares Hanks to James Stewart, the beloved everyman of classic Hollywood. He once said that if he had made Saving Private Ryan in 1951, the only actor he would have wanted was Jimmy Stewart. Hanks is that for the modern era. They have made 5 films and 3 acclaimed war series together across more than 25 years. Leonardo DiCaprio. Their only collaboration was Catch Me If You Can in 2002, and it was one of the most joyful shoots either of them experienced. They filmed across 147 locations in just 52 days, moving fast and making quick decisions. But what changed Spielberg was getting to know DiCaprio as a person. He had arrived carrying the tabloid version of Leo, the party boy image that had followed DiCaprio since Titanic. Working together dismantled every assumption. Spielberg met his family and found a deeply grounded private person who bore no resemblance to the headlines. He felt almost guilty for having believed the gossip. He also saw in DiCaprio's eyes exactly what Frank Abagnale, the teenage con man, required. A sharp, watchful intelligence that made every deception completely believable. Both men have spoken about wanting to work together again. It has not happened yet, but the desire is clearly still there on both sides. Robin Williams. He only made Hook with Spielberg and contributed a voice to AI. On paper, that is a thin collaboration. But Williams belongs on this list for something no camera ever captured. In 1993, Spielberg was in Poland filming Schindler's List. It was the heaviest, most emotionally demanding work of his life. He was filming the Holocaust in the actual country where it happened, carrying that weight every single day, far from home, and sinking under the darkness of the material. Robin Williams knew, so he called regularly, not to talk business. He would immediately launch into 15 minutes of completely unscripted stand-up comedy delivered at full commitment for an audience of exactly one person. Spielberg would laugh until the grief and pressure released in ways nothing else could manage. And Williams never said goodbye. He would build to the biggest laugh he could produce and then hang up right at the peak of it. Gone, leaving his friend laughing alone in the dark in Poland with the line, already dead. A gift asking for nothing in return. When Williams died in 2014, Spielberg described him as a lightning storm of comic genius and said he simply could not believe he was gone. The loss hit him at a depth that went well beyond the professional. 6 actors, one thread connecting all of them. Spielberg does not just hire talent. He builds trust and then extends it further than most directors ever dare. He lets Ford change a scene in 5 minutes. He casts Dreyfus as himself. He surrenders his entire set to Day-Lewis. He follows Hanks into misery across 25 years of shared work. He discards every assumption about DiCaprio the moment the real person appears. And he lets Robin Williams hang up on him mid-laugh in the darkest winter of his career and understands that the hanging up is the point. The greatest director of his generation has always been at his absolute best when he found the right person and trusted them completely with something real. That was always the secret. 6 actors, 5 decades, one director who knew the magic was never entirely his alone.